Hi, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar, which is about pricing your rental property. As you can tell, we're back in the office now, which is great. Lockdowns have come to an end, and it's great to be able to be with you today. Thank you all for making the time to join us. We recognize that there's plenty of other things going on in your life, but for us, self-managing a property is always important, and we love to get feedback from our customers. So thanks very much for being here today, and if you've got any feedback, you're welcome to email us at info@rentbetter.com.au. So there's a couple of things to talk about in today's session. Now, there's two objectives when pricing your rental property. The first is obviously no one prices it just for fun. The reason to do it is number one, to generate demand and interest in your property. And number two, of course, is for you to earn rental income. And so those two things become really important. So there's a couple of methods that we would typically recommend our customers look at when pricing their property, and we're going to go through that today. So just on the first objective, of course, just the idea that you're generating demand. You'll see on the property sites, if you were to go to realestate.com.au or to Domain or even rent.com.au, that you can typically search by particular property prices, and you can obviously sort by prices. Now that becomes a really important factor. We sometimes see people price right at the sort of bottom of a bracket, which kind of means that you've just missed out on the one below or you're in the one above. So it's really important to just look at those pricing criteria and see where you fit and where you're going to come up in search results when people do price their properties. Because obviously what you want to do is generate interest in the property, and price tends to be the biggest driver. What we'll often see with our customers is that, you know, they may have got an appraisal some time ago and someone told them it was going to be $1 million a week in rental income. And then of course you put it up on the property sites and the neighbor or the apartment next door is offered at a substantially lower price. And of course it's a market with market dynamics. So on the basis that there's one next door that looks similar priced at a lower price, that's going to get all the attention. So it's really important that you get it right in order to generate demand. The second thing, as I said before, is the ability to earn the right level of rental income. We won't touch on that today, but you know, there's obviously some calculations that would be done around figuring out what is the sort of minimum that you could accept to offset any of the costs or costs of borrowing, just to make sure that your rental income makes sense for you. But back to the first, how do you price it? There's a couple of ways to do it. The first is, as we just discussed, if you went to one of the property sites and you were to do a search on something specific, so it might be, you know, 2-bedroom unit in this suburb, and just look at the list of properties that appear and sort of force rank them almost from what's an inferior property, one that you're better than, or a superior property, one that you are in fact not better than. And we typically would suggest just sort of price it in the middle on the basis that you can see what's going on in the market. And you'll be able to gauge interest based on the level of response to your property. So that's the first thing, is just sort of doing a check in the market and seeing what's real and what's happening at the time. The second method, and you'll see it if you were to go to the rentbetter.com.au landing page and scroll down to the pricing report, what you'll see there is that you can actually generate through CoreLogic an actual report and a pricing estimate. It's based on historical and past data, so it's not always going to be perfect, but it is using public information and what's available at in the market. So you kind of get a sense of, well, when they crunch the numbers, what might a reasonable price for my property look like? And so when you put those two things together, it kind of helps you in a sense to understand what the right level to price at is. Now, as I said before, we typically see price as the main driver for a property. You can always start with a price that may be higher or lower for that matter and see what happens. If you start too high and there's not that much interest to begin with, we typically recommend that just sort of lower down that price and look at your competition and what else is out there. If you start too low, you can typically see that there's a fairly high volume of responses and inquiries, and that just means demand's pretty high, and you might like to consider or reconsider the price on that basis. So basically those are the key points that I wanted to make today. When you're pricing, number one, the first thing to consider is the level of interest and use that to sort of gauge where you price at. Number two is to consider your rental income and what you need. If you're going to do it, we would suggest going out to market and looking what's available on the day, and you can use obviously the pricing report that's available through the Rent Better website. So thanks so much for your time. If you've got any questions, you're welcome to email us at info@rentbetter.com.au. Thanks again and have a great evening.